8. Good evening and welcome to Pause for the Truth. I am Jocelyn Turner, your co-host. So happy that you're joining us tonight. You'll see on the screen that somebody is obviously missing. And of course, I am talking about our co-host, Dr. Rogers Kane. Dr. Kane may be joining us tonight, but as doctors go, he had an emergency, so he may not be able to join us. So what did I do? I called my partner in the movement of public health and all things that related to the social determinants of health, and that is Dr. Lorene Husband. Dr. Husband, or Lorene, as I call you, and most people call you, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for contacting me to step in for Dr. Kane.
Certainly, I must say that I can't think of anybody else better. Oh, yes, I can, because I don't want to offend any other people, but we have had some wonderful, wonderful folks who stepped in on numerous occasions on the show, and Dr. Husband happens to be one person, and I won't say she's all over the place, but her main focus is really to help improve the health of our community. The main thing that Dr. Husband has been focusing on, of course, is addressing food insecurity in our community in so many different ways. We had Dr. Husband on talking about the Black Church movement, Black Church Food Security Network, excuse me, as well as talking about, oh gosh, climate change, you name it, anything related to making our community healthy for our family. Dr. Husband has been on board. So thank you so much for pitching in, and I know you're gonna engage in tonight's discussion that is a very important one. I tell you, when I turn on the television, I'm just so saddened to see, and I can't even say just turn on the television, but when I'm driving around Jacksonville, if you drive almost any community in Jacksonville, you're going to see what appears to be homelessness in Jacksonville. And I'm not going to say what appears to be homelessness. I'm going to say an indication of homelessness in Jacksonville. So we have some very distinguishing guests with us tonight. I call them distinguishing. One of these two individuals I just met, the other one, we go way back to the University of Florida. So I am going to introduce the lady first, and that is Dawn Gilman with Changing Homelessness. Just had the pleasure of meeting you. How are you doing this evening, Dawn?
Doing very well. Thank you so much for having me on tonight. I appreciate it, and I know it'll be a very interesting discussion on what is out there and what we can do to change homelessness in Jacksonville.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us. And we know that we're going to learn a lot from you tonight, and our listeners will be asking questions, and the show will be repeated. It is going to be available after tonight. And also joining is my friend, as I mentioned, from way back yonder at the University of Florida, where we met. I used to just call him Al Barlow, but now he is Pastor Al Barlow. And Pastor Barlow is representing the Housing for the Homeless campaign. He's a true champion of this cause. How are you doing this evening, Pastor Barlow?
I'm very blessed, and thanks for having me on such a very, very good show and timely.
Absolutely, very timely. Before we get started tonight, we want to show our listeners a couple of things, our viewers and listeners, I should say, a couple of things. We're going to show you a video and follow by a PowerPoint, and then we'll come back on the screen and start our discussion. Go ahead, Tyrone.
For the homeless. He wants you to join him in supporting his idea of funding the build of tiny homes.
It was Christmas Eve 2020 when Jacksonville attorney Al Barlow could not get these images out of his head. The city's homeless spending the holidays on the streets.
There's not been too many things that can just fire me up like trying to help these people.
He's made it his mission to find and even build them housing. Barlow wrote this petition that would take 5 cents from each dollar given through grants and forgivable loans to companies who develop downtown and put it toward the funding of tiny homes.
To be honest with you, I feel like almost everything I've gone through in life, a lot of hard times and everything else, brought me to the point to help these people. So it's like a calling in life to me.
Barlow is still working on his plan. He does not have a location nailed down yet, but believes this is the start of a solution to a problem that's plagued downtown for years. He created this website trying to get people to sign his petition. His goal is to get 3,000 signatures before the start of May.
I'm just legally taking advantage of a constitutional provision that we all have a right to do. I'm taking the next step.
We will be posting a copy of Barlow's petition in this story on firstcoastnews.com. I did reach out for the city for comment, but have not heard back. But what do homeless organizations think of this idea? I will have that all new for you at 6.
We have to have 3,000 petitions before the city of Jacksonville will review our petition. This is the petition here. I've highlighted the sections that must be completed in order for a petition to be accepted by the Supervisor of Elections Office. And the reason I took the time to do this is because we're getting back a lot of petitions that are improperly completed. So the name of the voter, and you have to be a voter in Duval County. Only Duval County voters can do this. Your address, city, state, zip, and county, either your registration number or your date of birth. I highly recommend that you use your voter registration number. We're hearing about a lot of identity thefts and everything that are happening when people sign petitions, not ours, other people's, I've heard on the campaign trail. So we try to suggest that people use their voter registration number. And then at the bottom, anybody can be a circulator. So anybody can circulate this petition. For instance, if you want to sign a petition, you can go to the website, but listen to the procedure that you have to undergo in order for it to be valid. Let's say you want to sign a petition, you download it, you print it out, you give it to somebody, you have them to hand it back to you. Now that person that gave it back to you is a circulator. Now you complete the petition, you have the person, the circulator, sign it at the very bottom where it says circulator. You sign where it says signature, a registered voter, you date it, but you have the person that you gave it to and gave it back to you to sign at the bottom. That's a circulator. Now, if it's two people, it's not an issue, but if you download one by yourself, you have to give it to somebody else, have them to hand it to you, and have them to be the witness, which is the circulator. And that's the procedure that has to take place in order for us to have a valid petition. Okay, you can remove that now from the screen. Thank you.
Wow, Pastor Barlow, that seems to be really complicated, and I can see how confusing it could be to someone. And just a quick question for you, is the petition available, say, at the Supervisor of Elections Office or some city entity that they could just go in and then the city staff person could be the witness or circulator, or that's not an option?
No, they can't do that. See, what happens most of the time, the way Jacksonville works, Jacksonville is different than a lot of other places. Other places you could download, you can fill it out electronically, a petition. You cannot do that in Jacksonville. They will only accept a paper file. And so the vast majority of petitions, we have people to sign them, like at my law office, out at campaign events, or whatever. So it's not an issue. But if you want to download one from the computer, okay, and you want to do it yourself, then you have to go through that process for it to be valid. But if let's say you want to download 10 and you want to get 10 signed, it's not a problem. You just download 10, print them out, have 10 people to sign them and turn them in. But if you want to do one yourself, you have to go through that process because we have to have a paper document to turn in. But most of the time, that's not the issue. People are just not following instructions because I'm writing letters and explaining everything. And then I get petitions back. They just haven't followed the instructions.
And I think before the end of the show tonight, people will have an opportunity to perhaps hear about some places that you're going to be or the campaign is going to be so that they can know that they're closing that loop with completing the form. Before we get started in the discussion any further, I'd like to mention to our guests that our viewers I'm tongue twisted tonight, that we do have a toll-free number. I know you're going to want to have some questions. So our toll-free number for tonight's discussion is 888-669-1280. I'll repeat it. It's 1-888-669-1280. So Don, tell me something. how did you get involved in homelessness in Jacksonville? And tell us why. We hear in Pastor Barlow's voice and see his passion about it, and it's a ministry for him. How did you get involved? And tell us about the landscape of homelessness in Jacksonville, please.
Sure. I work for an agency called Changing Homelessness. We have been around for 48 years at this point. We were actually founded downtown by other agencies and faith-based organizations back in the 70s when the first wave of unsheltered homelessness started hitting urban areas like downtown Jacksonville. Over the years, we have kind of grown and changed. We have two main roles right now. We are I guess the easiest way to think of it is a backbone agency, meaning we will apply for a lot of large, complex grants to help fund other agencies do things like provide housing and case management outreach for folks. We are a direct grantee of the VA, so that is the one area we directly work with veterans in a little bit larger area, from Daytona up to Savannah, Georgia, for them. So that is what we do. The landscape in Jacksonville, we're in 3 counties for Duval, Clay, and Nassau County as the lead agency. There's about 40 different member agencies. They're all providing different services to folks who either are homeless or are at risk of homelessness. Trying to think the easiest way to sort of explain what we have seen. A lot of folks, similar to Pastor Barlow, when COVID hit, we started to get more calls than we had in years. Anecdotally, I believe it's when that safer at home order went out, suddenly people were driving downtown and really, for the first time in a long time, started to think, what did it actually mean not to have a home, not to have a door you could lock, a chair you could sit in, a place to prepare your meal. So I think we've seen some interest, more political will, more person will to work with and address homelessness than we have in a long time. And that kind of is running up against what all of us, if you've had anyone in any of your circles try to find a place to live lately, whether to rent or to own, the landscape has changed dramatically since 2019. We were already in about 10 years of an affordable housing crisis, and it has accelerated through the pandemic. For example, through the Jacksonville Housing Authority, there are about 250 households who either have a HUD-VASH voucher or an emergency housing voucher who have them in hand, and in close to over 100 days cannot find housing in that price range. So there are people out there working on this. There always have been. And we got a surge in funding through the pandemic. And just as we were getting that surge, we started running up against the increase in housing at all price points throughout our community. So I guess from my perspective, that is what I am thinking about a lot, is how do we help folks now who are literally homeless, and as the COVID funding, federal funding is winding down, how do we shore up other safety nets to ensure people don't experience homelessness if there's any way possible for that?
One of the things I think about is, and Dr. Husband, you can chime in as well, because Lorene, I'm sorry, Lorene, I just went from Dr. Husband to Lorene, sorry. But anyway, when we talk about addressing hunger in Jacksonville or Northeast Florida, Lorene always says we just can't pass out food to people. That's a temporary fix, right? What's the long-term solution? And I think that's what I'd like to talk about. Are you aware of any best practices, if you will, or are there any other cities in Florida or the nation that are doing some things that maybe we should consider doing here in Jacksonville? Because I watched the show Tiny Houses, for example, And I thought that that was the cutest thing. And one thing that Jacksonville boasts of, when I came from public health, that Jacksonville was the largest city in land in the nation. I mean, God forbid, we can't put a bunch of tiny houses on some of that land.
So, and I think what Pastor Barlow is especially talking about is unsheltered or street homelessness. People who are literally on the streets, they do not have a safe place to go. The community that I know of that I've visited that actually is done the best is one that might surprise you. It is Cleveland, Ohio. For a decade and a half, they have done the really boring hard work of planning, braiding funding. They ensure that they build a new permanent supportive housing apartment complex annually. So they're always adding to their deeply affordable housing stock. They have very coordinated efforts amongst the different agencies to ensure that they quickly identify people who do fall into homelessness. And they have a really good diversion or problem solving program. So when someone walks into a front door, before they start doing any sort of assessment or any like getting into like what's your name and your birth date and all of that, they ask about the story. And because everybody came from somewhere, right? So where could you go back to? Like, even if it's just for tonight or if it's just for a week, or did you fight with your aunt? Did you promise something or somebody broke something and can we help you out make that right? I mean, that sounds so simple as I said it in like 45 seconds. When these conversations happen, generally speaking, they are over an hour to get to that point to uncover what the trigger point was, if it's where someone can go back to. But yeah, as to your point, shelters fix an immediate need, right? If someone is homeless tonight, they can be the place for someone to go, just like a meal at any of our missions or shelters that gives a meal today for that meal that you need. If we're looking at fully addressing the issue as a community, we have to decide we are willing to invest not in just affordable housing, but deeply affordable housing. And the one example that really kind of clicks with most people, if someone is on Social Security disability, they get about $724 a month. HUD says you should only spend 30% of your income on housing. That's about $125 a month, right? So when I started, many moons ago, back in 2007, 2009, we were still excited if we could find something for under $500. I mean, that was then. Now the prices have really gone up. So those folks who have very limited incomes or coming off the streets with zero incomes, we need to be able to build something for them.
So, Dawn, I wanted to ask you really quickly because I was on Eviction Lab today and looking at the numbers of folks being evicted on a daily basis in the Jacksonville area, for one, and especially individuals with children. So we're finding that there's so many families with little children who are couch surfing, as well as some of them live at Walmart, in Walmart's parking lots in their vehicles. And what is Changing Homeless, as well as the other folks who provide homeless services, what are they doing to address this issue, which will only become worse?
So I'm going to kind of start at the back end and move forward. So there was a tremendous amount of funding that came out through the Treasury Department. The program was called ERAP through both the city and the state. That program is winding down, meaning that pool of funding for eviction prevention has started to dry up. There is very little eviction prevention money out there in the system. In Duval County, to stay in eviction, and I think our attorney can probably speak to this if I say anything wrong, if you get a 3-day notice, you must show up with a check in hand in full to stay the eviction. Wow. You have to move fast. It's very hard to do. When we talk about people becoming homeless, I'll go back to the Great Recession because that's the most recent, somewhat similar kind of shock to the system that we've had nationwide. Most people who are evicted will never become homeless. They will couch surf, they will double up, they will move in with friends and family until they can figure it back out. Some will, but it's more about 2 to 3%. And a lot of times that is folks with families. If you look at our by name list, which is a list of everybody that we know who is currently homeless, the overwhelming majority of folks who are living on the street are single adults. They skew older, they skew browner, they skew slightly more now towards men than women than the normal 50-50 average. But when we have these conversations, and this is really important, is when we're talking about what are we trying to solve, right? Is the solving of the problem that we want to ensure nobody in Jacksonville has to sleep on the streets, that we always have a place for them to go, and that we have a way for them to move into housing. That is a population that is different than if we're talking about people who experience evictions. And in no way am I saying that evictions are not traumatic. That can be a trauma for a family. It is different than actually experiencing literal homelessness.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a much bigger pool if we say we're going to prevent homelessness in Duval County. Not that that is not a goal to do. A more measurable goal is homelessness. We can see the people who are out experiencing homelessness, who are sleeping on our streets at night.
So can you speak a little bit about how is it that some communities are achieving zero homelessness for veterans around the country?
That is an awesome question. So, because I don't necessarily like the word zero, it's functional zero. So
Right.
Achieving that means you have the capacity within your community to identify and assist any veteran that has a housing crisis within 30 days, right? So we actually, part of that by name list, you can break it down by different groups. It can be the big list. It can be just of people who are veterans. We look at how many new people flow into our system every month. We look at how many people can we house every month. The amount that we can house every month is our capacity. To actually start moving towards functional zero, you got to be able to house more people out than flow in or experience a housing crisis. So it was developed by several joint agencies under the Interagency Council on Homelessness. So it is a little bit wonky in the way that it is measured, but it does give communities a measurable goal to work towards. I will say the more difficult achievement is sustaining it. Once they reach functional zero, either there's several communities have reached it for veterans. A few communities have reached it for chronically homeless folks. There is a big push now, and with the Built for Zero movement, to see who can be the first community to reach that for single adults. Again, because that unsheltered homelessness is what we're seeing really start to spike over the last, even before COVID. It was starting to creep up in ways that we're trying to figure out why. What's the why behind that, other than affordability and income disparity, which we can also talk about. But those are also some underlying issues with homelessness.
So, Pastor Barlow, I just have a question for you. How did you, I mean, I know you're a pastor, and I know God lays things on our hearts and our spirit. And I know that once you get into something, you're going to give it 110%. But, I saw the interview that you did with First Coast News, and your solution, if you will, or suggestion or recommendation is that we make it law, and I may be saying it wrong, you're the attorney, so correct me as you need to, that if we just take 5 cents, I mean, if we think about it, if we give up 5 cents, and not even us, you're talking about businesses, right? Give up 5 cents for every dollar. Explain that again, how that worked, and how you see that that would really help address the issue of homelessness in our communities. You're muted. You're muted, Pastor. Unmute yourself. Oh, gotcha.
Okay. The whole system. Okay. So what it is this is what people don't realize. The city of Jacksonville gives grants, loans, and forgivable loans to millionaires like you wouldn't believe. Last year alone, the city of Jacksonville, through the Downtown Investment Authority, gave away $500 million to wealthy people to renovate old buildings downtown and or construct new buildings. Now, the city, that is an investment for the city. And so all I'm saying is for the loans that don't have to be repaid, that's the forgivable loans, and for the grants, reserve 5% of that money that's it's coming from the city going to the rich. We're talking about reserving 5%. You just calculate 5% of $500 million, and you'll see how much money that is to build housing for the homeless. It can be, what I'm trying to do is wide open. And I thank Dawn for helping me to modify the petition, because the original petition I had was for tiny housing exclusively, but I had a good conversation with her and she kind of schooled me on some things. And I modified the petition so that it can do tiny housing. It can do rent assistance. It can do a wide variety of things, but you have to change. And what I asked the city of Jacksonville to do this. I talked to Mark Lamping, who's the CEO of the Jaguars, when he was going around trying to promote their proposal for the city to give them $100 and something million, and the city gave it to him. And I asked him publicly, would you support a proposal that would require the city of Jacksonville to set aside a portion of those funds that are going to you all? And he said, yes. I have him on audio. He said, yes, I think that's a good idea. We would support something like that. He said, but what we're not going to do is tell the city council to do that. That's a policy decision that they have to make, or guess what? We, the public, have to make it for them. So what I'm trying to do, I've asked the city to do it. They wouldn't do it. The mayor ignored me. All the city councilmen ignored me with the exception of one, but he said they wouldn't do it. And so what I did was I put my legal hat on and I drafted a petition that if it passes, it's going to require the city of Jacksonville to set aside 5% of every grant and forgivable loan. Now, I'm going to say something that's going to upset some people, but that's corporate welfare. That's what that is. And so I was meeting with some people from the mayor's office and one of the city councilmen last year, and they asked me, so, well, Pastor Barlow, what do you think the city's responsibility should be towards providing permanent housing for the homeless? Now that was kind of a catch-22 question, okay? Because what they were really asking me is, should the city be giving welfare to the homeless to build housing? The answer to that question is no. No, they shouldn't. But guess what? The answer to the question that they never asked me was, should the city be giving away $500 million a year to the rich to build housing? I mean, to build new buildings downtown. The answer to that question is no. But since they're going to do it for the rich, we can reserve 5% for the poor. So if they can do that for the rich, they can do it for the poor. And so what this law will do is it will change the charter to require 5% of that money. So if they don't give away any more money to the wealthy, none would come to the homeless. But as long as they give money away, and they're going to do it, 5% of it, if this passes, will go towards helping permanently house homeless people.
So when you get the signatures, what's the next step? You get the signatures. How many signatures do you say you need?
This is a two-step process. First of all, you have to have 30,000 signatures, valid signatures by November 29th. But before you get there, you have to do 3,000 for the general counsel's office to review the legal sufficiency of the petition. And if they determine that it's not legally sufficient, I have two options. I can take it to court and let a judge review, which is what I'm going to do, or I could just start all over. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take them to court, and I think I'm going to have to take them to court. But I need 3,000 petitions in order to do that. And let me just be honest with you. This is all of our problem. This is not just the city city's problem. It's not the mayor's problem. It's all of our problem. I'm trying to get people to understand, listen, it's in your own best interest morally, psychologically, emotionally, politically, and economically to help these people, because I'm sorry to tell some people, within 2 years, some of the people who think they're fine right now, they're going to be homeless. It is coming like a freight train. Nobody's going to escape the impact of this. Nobody's going to escape.
So have you seen any examples, either you or Don, Pastor, or Ballo, where other cities have implemented a similar strategy? And if so, how's that working?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. This is not cookie cut stuff. See, this is what I'm doing here is, to my knowledge, has never been done anywhere ever. And that's why a lot of people don't even understand it. It's new. It's just out of the box. And all I'm doing is time. If the city stops giving away hundreds of millions of dollars, this wouldn't even be possible. But I don't think any city has ever done anything like this. I want to ask Dawn to let you all know what she took. Because that reporter who interviewed me, he contacted her and he asked her how much she thinks that it will cost to house homeless people. And she told him. Can you tell us that figure that you told him?
Sure. So because it's numbers, right? So the first thing I think that's most important, we're already paying for folks that are homeless, than living on the street. Ability Housing, I believe it's still on their website, but it costs about $30,000 per person per year for a chronically homeless individual to be on the street. That's they're arrested for petty crimes. They get transported by ambulance. They go to crisis stabilization units. So there is already a cost, a large cost to do nothing. To stably permanently house someone in permanent supportive housing is about $20,000 per year per person.
Wow.
If we want, and this is before COVID and a past round of city council elections, looking at the numbers, how many people were unsheltered downtown, I estimated if we had between $5 and $7 million per year for at least 5 years, we could probably cut street homelessness in half. But I also warned everybody, in the second or third year, we'd run out of affordable housing. Well, in the past 2 years, we've gotten a little bit less per year than those numbers, and we have essentially run out of affordable housing. So it is a tangible number to do this, but it's not a one and done, right? Just like everyone's looking for a single project to bring back downtown, there's not a single apartment complex, there's not a single program, there's not a single anything that will significantly reduce homelessness. And I think it can be reduced to that functional level. There will always be crises. People will have financial crises or a housing crisis, something will happen. But we want to get to the point where we can respond to those crises quickly. And to your question earlier, for those folks who are facing eviction, if we can house our folks who are chronically homeless, who have a physical disability, who are living on the streets, we can then start moving upstream. There's more resources that would be available to keep people in their housing, to start doing more diversion or prevention, versus right now there's a lot of people living on the streets that need a lot of help to be able to stay housed.
But Dawn,
I don't know why, Don, I'm sorry, Pastor, my thought or vision of, remember Jerry Lewis, wasn't that his name? He used to do the telethon every year. I'm thinking, we raise funds as a community for so much. And I'm not suggesting, Pastor Barlow, that this would not take the place of what you're saying. But I mean, people come together and raise money for stuff while we're waiting for all of these legal things to go through. Have you ever thought about doing, trying to organize for all of you who are in the movement of homelessness to have some type of telethon? People are used to having GoFundMe accounts nowadays and donating money. And I know that's a short-term fix, but at least to get things started rather than being stagnant, because none of us like seeing people on the side of the road. And by the way, Pastor, I've passed you along Dunn Avenue, having conversations with people. So I know you're literally out on the streets having conversations with people. So kudos to you. But I mean, what can we do like right now? We're going to work with Pastor to get those signatures, but I don't want to stop with the 3,000 signatures. I really wish that he could carry 30,000 signatures to the city folks to say, now, is this enough proof that we need to do something about this?
No. If we get 30,000 petitions in, this is the process. 3,000 first, 30,000 by November 29th. That puts it on the ballot May 16th of next year. Then it has to be voted on. I think if it gets on the ballot, it's going to pass. If it gets on the ballot, it's going to pass, and then the money starts rolling in after that. And so this is a long-term fix. You know, when I first started, I was giving about $500 a week every Friday in gift cards to Winn-Dixie and Harvey's, you know. So I did that for a year, just about every Friday for a year, okay, with donations from, you know, because I run a ministry that's nonprofit, so people were donating. But I came to the realization very quick, they get food, they get fed real good Saturday and Sunday. Now they might starve Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, but a lot of people are helping them with food on the weekends. But what they need is housing. So I shifted gears and you know, so 30,000 by November 29th, gets on the ballot by May. And then if it passes, then that money will start rolling in automatically. And this is a long-term fix. Now, Dawn can tell you what Miami did. I would love for her to tell you what Miami did. And she recommended that Jacksonville do it, but she'll tell you what happened when she recommended it.
Yeah. So there is actually a state law that allows any of the 67 counties in the state of Florida to put a food and beverage tax for the homeless. Dade County is the only one that has ever passed it. It was passed about 25 years ago. So if you go to Miami and you go out to dinner or go to a bar and your tab goes over $100, you donate $1 to the Miami-Dade Homeless Trust. So they, on average, I'm trying to remember, I believe they get about $7 to $8 million a year. Again, that was pre-COVID. I believe they're back up with tourism again with that. So that money goes to the trust. 85% of it goes for homelessness. 15% of it goes specifically to assist folks fleeing domestic violence. It has been very successful for them. It gives them a guaranteed or a predictable income stream that they can be the first money in on a permanent supportive housing project or be the last money in. Or there was a question about mental health. It can provide case management, other medical services, all of the wraparound. It can do anything that is in the plan to end homelessness. It is eligible for that. However, it is.
What happened in Jacksonville? Why didn't we? What needs to happen in order for that need to happen? For that to happen, rather.
It would be something similar to what Pastor Barlow is doing, meaning it would go before the voters or city council, but then it must be approved by the state legislature. So in this past session, there were 3 municipalities. Miami Beach was one in Dade County that chose initially not to go in with the trust. Well, they have seen, if you go to the last time I was in Miami, if you go downtown, almost no homeless folks. You go to Miami Beach, there's a lot of homeless folks because there's a different level of services available to help work with them. Even though those communities said they wanted in, they were choosing to tax themselves to help with the homeless, the state legislature turned them down. So that is, I'll do it politically correctly. If the state legislature stays in the same general makeup that it was last year, even if they Hillsborough County or Duval County or any of the large counties in the state said, yes, we want to do that too, it is unlikely for us to get permission to do that.
But Dawn, what was the first administration in the city of Jacksonville that you introduced? I believe you sent that bill to at least 1 or 2 administrations, did you not?
I have talked about it for several administrations. So I have been in this seat running this agency since 2009. So that would have started with the Payton administration, and we have moved forward in every iteration with that they are definitely aware that that exists, and that's a mechanism they could use.
And so, ladies and gentlemen, what she's really speaking very diplomatically right now. I don't know if you can tell or not. She's very, very good at what she does. But I'm an agitator. I'm a sledgehammer. When a sledgehammer is necessary, I'm going to pick it up. And so I'm going to pick the sledgehammer up right now. Excuse me. The city of Jacksonville does not have the political will to do this. If the city had done this, I wouldn't be out here trying to get 30,000 petitions right now. But the city of Jacksonville will raise a tax for what they want to raise a tax for, but they won't do it for something like this. And I just heard yesterday, I haven't seen it on the news yet because I've been busy, but I got one of the persons on our campaign committee told me yesterday that they saw a story on the news that one of the councilmen is getting ready to introduce legislation to outlaw panhandling, it's kind of like a fad going across the country. Well, I posted this right here. Let's get ready to rumble. I'm going to fight that all the way. You're not going to listen. You're not helping the people with a tax like Miami did. You're not signing up. You're not, doing what I asked you to do to set aside 5% last year. You're making me file a petition to get 30,000 signatures. And then on top of that, you're going to tell me that you're going to outlaw panhandling. You don't want to help them and you don't want me to help them either. No. So what's happening around the country is that they're outlawing helping people. So if you go in certain cities, if you hand a homeless person something, that's a misdemeanor. So they're not helping and they don't want you and me to help. We have a problem.
So have they gotten around, those cities and counties getting around the federal legislation that says you cannot criminalize the unhoused individuals? So they are going after the citizens who are giving out the gifts?
They're going after the homeless people in some cities. And in other cities, they're going after the persons who help homeless people too. I've seen it both ways. I've been scouring the country for over a year, seeing what other cities are doing. And that's how I know I've seen anybody doing what we're trying to do right now. I believe that if we do this, it'll be a model for the nation because it's not causing it's not causing a tax increase. It's coming from the money that they're giving to the rich already. So it's the rich that's really paying for it. It's not the taxpayer.
So let me ask you this, since Dawn talked about a little bit about what happened with Miami Beach, and that sounds to me like preemption. So what if we were to go through this petition and we get, the citizens vote, we have seen the last few years where the governor and the legislator has come back and said, no, counties and cities cannot do that. No. Legally, what's possible?
No. See, we are a consolidated city, and under our charter, we have the right to do this. Like, for instance, like that thing with the sheriff just now, had he been in another county, he could have moved, but our charter forbids that. So our charter allows us as the people to change it, which is the Constitution, when the elected officials won't do it. So if we vote this into law, if the General Counsel approves the language of the petition, the legal sufficiency of it, or if they don't and I take it to court and a judge does it by order, and then it gets on the ballot and it's voted into law, the state can do nothing about it. The federal government can do nothing about it. The money will start rolling into the homeless. And the way I have it in the petition is 3 ways. The money could go to HUD, it can go to the Housing Finance Authority, and it can also go to organizations that are designed and have a history of constructing housing for homeless people. So it's 3 different entities that can get that money to make sure that it goes to where it needs to go to.
I have another question. I think it's for Dawn. Dawn, have you been working with the business community, especially the chambers, to see, because, especially like in downtown and in other areas, now that individuals who are homeless are all over Jacksonville, but they typically congregate where there's thriving businesses sometimes. So what is the business community saying about the increased number of unhoused individuals, and what can they do to start creating some solutions? Because this is an all of us kind of thing.
So most business people would just like the homeless to not be in their eyesight, right? So that is, there are very few people who are really ready to think about how do you solve a large, complex problem? Because that is homelessness. I mean, we can go back through the history of it and how we have arrived here. So yes, I have worked with the chamber. I have worked and spoken to many downtown groups and many business groups. But again, I think the message and part of what Pastor Barlow is doing is communicating. This is not like give an agency a one-time amount of money. It's how do we do something over the next decade, that is a cohesive plan, right? We have data that can show us where are homeless people, what sort of people are more likely to become homeless. Um, right now I am worried about folks who are 55 and up with a disability on the street, right? That's a high need group. So if this were already in fact, then how do you campaign to get something that would support those individuals so they can come safely off the street and be helped? So it's there are certain things that government is good at, and doing something that's kind of a social good for all of us, kind of forcing us to do what is right, I think is the way Pastor Barlow sort of put it at one point. Um, that can be helpful, right? Because if we look at the last large structure that Sulzbacher built for both emergency housing and for permanent housing, that was a $20 million project, right? So, and it did house people, and there is housing there, and it is full almost every single day. So how do we build one of those every year or something with that kind of capacity so we can be like Cleveland 10 years from now, where we have constructed 1,000 new units and kept up with that demand? That's where we start to really move the needle. It's not a 1-year project, it's a multi-year project with vision that it's not just housing, it's housing with services. It's meeting people where they're at to allow them to decide what is safe and right for them to come off the street.
So if a pastor, I want you to unmute yourself because this is directed towards you. I'm putting my Dr. Kane hat on right now because I know if he were here, he would say this. So pastor, hold on to your seatbelt. I'm sorry, you termed yourself an agitator. So I want you to I'm trying to stir something up in you. One of the unfortunate statistics that Dawn said at the very beginning, she gave the picture of who the majority of folks who are homeless in Jacksonville. And the one that sticks out in my mind are African American men. So let's talk about the elephant in the room of institutional racism. What is your opinion, Pastor, about the institutional things systems that are still in place that do not allow, prohibit, do not encourage, do not assist, say it how you want, for the Black man to thrive?
Well, I'll just say it like this. I mean, systemic racism, prejudice, discrimination, disparate treatment is from the cradle to the grave. I mean, in every aspect of society, period. I saw it when I was in law school. It's generational. I mean, so it goes from every aspect of society. And so it's just baked into the United States of America, into the legal system. And a lot of times you don't recognize it until you go somewhere else. When you go somewhere else, you do some traveling, you go to other nations, you can see the difference in how people treat you. You know, I've been to overseas and everything, and just people come up to you and nice, speak to you and everything else. It's a whole different ballgame. And even interstate is differently. You can go to certain states and they treat you a lot differently than they do in the South. So there is institutional racism on all levels. I've seen it in law school. I see it in court. I've drafted some some software that we use to try to help people get equitable sentences. But even in that, more Caucasian attorneys use it for Caucasians and African American attorneys use it for African Americans. So it's just there's it's baked into the system. But I want to go back to something Dr. Husband asked Dawn a minute ago, because I've talked to the chamber, I've talked to their media person about what I'm trying to do. He never got back to me. So that told me, because he told me he's going to talk to the powers that be over there to see if I can get an audience to talk to them about this proposal. Never heard back from them. So one of the things I'm doing, by the way, is eliminating excuses. So people are not going to say, well, Barlow never came to us. We never, no, you heard about it. You rejected it. You had a question on here I saw earlier that Dawn can address. They asked about services for the mental health services or whatever. When Dawn mentioned case management services, kind of tell them what all that includes, Dawn, when you say you all provide case management services.
So case management is whatever the individual needs, right? So it can be intensive, right? There are people, and I'm gonna go into a little bit of what like our acronyms or what we talk about when we're working with someone and trying to determine how vulnerable are they. We're going to look if they have a disability. It could be a mental health disability. It could be a physical disability. It could be a substance use disability. So if you look at the most vulnerable folks, they're actually what we now are calling trimorbid, meaning they've got all three. Some folks are duly diagnosed. They have two of the three, and some have a single disability. And folks living on the street, there's probably a smaller percentage of them with a severe and persistent mental illness than you would think. I mentioned that 50. So yes, we offer mental health counseling. We offer other resources for them. And when we start talking to people, right, this past couple weeks, it's been unbearably hot outside. If a person gets dehydrated, they may exhibit symptoms that you might think they either were experiencing dementia or a mental illness. If they get rehydrated and get some protein, those symptoms may go away. So sometimes it's that moment that you're talking to the person and figuring out what they need. We talked about this earlier. What do you need right now, this instant, to help you? And what's your long-term plan that we need, both for that individual and for our community? So yeah, a lot of times when we write grants, the cost for the case management is close to the cost for housing, because there is we try to ensure that the ratio of households to case manager is between 15 and 25 per case manager, so they can truly assist those folks that need it.
So, Don, when I came to Jacksonville in 2010, I think I got to learn about what Changing Homelessness does, I think in 2011, and I got to learn about who you are in the way that Changing Homelessness, with all the partners under who do those type of services, the way you manage the TB crisis in the region. And could you talk a little bit about the HMIS and how truly that the service providers in the homelessness space know by name who individuals are on our streets and in our alleyways?
That is a great question, Dr. Husband, because it also gets to a question that just got chatted into the chat box with that. So yes, there is a database that we use that is open for all our member agencies. So we do know by name. We try to get that information so we know who is experiencing homelessness and what is their vulnerability. So when I start to give out like actual numbers, what will it cost to, if the Magic Fairy gave us funding today, what would it cost today to house everybody, assuming there was enough homeless housing available? Now my tongue is getting twisted. It's based on those numbers. So there was a question in here that it has decreased in 2020 and no update info for 2021 or 2022. So you can go on our website and you can see those point in time reports, but there was this COVID thing that happened in both of those years. So January of 2020 was the last year we had our full point in time everything, where we recruited 150, 200 people. People went out in teams. We engaged with folks who were experiencing homelessness in an unsheltered situation. And then we use that HMIS system for everyone who is in shelter, either in shelter or transitional housing, because they're still homeless. 2021, we did our best to do an unsheltered count. It is an anomaly year, right? We had to back it all the way to just use folks that were already working with the homeless, because we didn't want to introduce COVID into that population that does not have ready access to any kind of medical services. And we also we just didn't want to mix different populations that weren't already in that pod. In 2022, since we had attempted it last year, we are only required by HUD to do it every other year. This was right as the Omicron variant was going through. We could not do it.
So let me translate what she just said in plain English. Okay. We don't know, but 9 times out of 10 is higher, because I see it. I'm with these people. I see them every day, and it's progressively more. I help them locate veterans. So when I know somebody's a veteran, I put them in touch with them. And so I work closely with them. But I can tell you right now, those numbers is higher. They just haven't had an opportunity to count them properly. But that the numbers are higher now than they've ever been before. Anecdotally, we know that.
The unsheltered numbers were going up before COVID. So right. I am assuming that has not changed, as we have not gotten, a couple hundred deeply affordable units just readily available to us. And it's a moving number. When we talk about that by name list, that gets updated weekly. So if I give you numbers off of that is always changing, because people come in, people flow out. So that is also one of the frustrations we run into. A lot of people want it to be like a thing. You do, if this happens, we'll see that end result, where I think, as we've talked about, it's a long, redlining happened back in the 1930s, and we're still dealing with the repercussions of that and the housing in our community today, 100 years later. So I think it will take a while for us to come out of it, but it is not impossible.
Well, we've had a great discussion tonight, and the time is nearing. We're almost at the 7:30 mark. We certainly don't want to keep our guests beyond the hour. We could definitely have you back on, and hopefully Dr. Kane will be with us in addition to Dr. Husband. We don't want to remove Dr. Husband from the discussion. But at the end of our show, we like to always ask our guests to end with your final thoughts as we really talk about homelessness and how to move people to stable housing. So Dawn, I'll start with you. What are your final thoughts about tonight's discussion?
So I'll end as I usually start. If you see me speak in public, housing as we know it today in the United States is a completely solvable problem, but it will take resources to get to that solution.
That's so encouraging. Thank you. Pastor Barlow, what are your final thoughts with tonight's discussion? And don't forget to make your plug. I don't know why I say it to you, don't forget, but make your plug about the signatures.
Please log on to housingforthehomelesscampaign.com, housingforthehomelesscampaign.com, because we have to do this right here. We have to end homelessness, no more homelessness. The bottom line is that I was moved with compassion about these people, because it's only but by the grace of God that I'm not homeless myself. And I think that's the perfect position for us to be in, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, and psychologically. One of the things I'm trying to get people to understand is, a lot of people come out and they do some great things, but it's a one-time thing to them. They'll come out and give them a sandwich or two, and they think they've done something good. That's good, but they need a sandwich tomorrow and next week and next month as well. And so what I'm trying to get people to understand is this is our problem. This is a reflection of our city. When people come off 95 from New York going south, they come 10 east from Louisiana, Texas, California, they exit to see downtown, the first thing they see is a homeless person on the corner of Davis and Union, or at Jefferson and Union, or at Broad and Union, and going on down to Main Street as well, begging for food. And that's not a good perspective for us to have for our city. So this is our city, and we need to step up to the plate and do right by these people like we would want people to do right by us if we were homeless. Amen.
Amen, Pastor. Dr. Husband, what are your final thoughts regarding tonight's discussion?
I really enjoyed our panelists. And so in my regular day job as the Director of Public Policy and Community Engagement, one of the critical strategies we're working on as a food bank is ending poverty. And we know that housing plays a major role into why people are coming into our food lines. So I would love to meet with you, Pastor Barlow. And Don, you know I'm always available for anything that I can ever do, because Pastor Barlow, I can help you get your signatures because we have access to over 30,000 individuals a day.
Hallelujah.
But I have to get permission first.
In the name of
If
Jesus.
we're not able to do it as an organization, I will give you access to the citizens and you can do what you do.
In the name of Jesus, that shall be done.
Thank you all. This is a very, 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 very informative discussion. I really appreciate your passion. First of all, I'm loving your passion about this, because the notion of, am I my brother's keeper? Yes, we are, right? That comes to mind for me. On Pause for the Truth, we try to bring those conversations that would really help individuals and families in our community live healthier lives in all aspects of their lives. A lot of the topics that we bring up, some of us are not fully aware of them. That's why we bring the experts on. Clearly, Dawn and Pastor Barlow are the experts and have enlightened us so much tonight. Please go on Pastor Barlow on the website that he said. Hold on. Pastor, can you say that again? Housing
for the Homeless campaign.com. There it is.
Housing for the Homeless campaign.com. And we will have it on our website, pauseforthetruth.com. So you'll be able to go to that as well. If any of you have any future topics that you'd like for us to talk about, please email us at info@pauseforthetruth.com, because we do like to have discussions about things that are happening with folks, because that's our goal, to make our community healthier by first increasing knowledge about what's going on. Thank you to our guests. Thank you to our behind the scenes guy, technology expert, Tyrone, call Tyrone.net, Tyrone Jackson. And also we're hoping that Dr. Kane is okay and that he will be joining us next week. Thank you, Don. Thank you, Pastor Barlow. And thank you, Dr. Husband.
Yeah,
have a great evening.
Thank you.
I'm Ken Amaro, and this is Getting It Done. Today on Getting It Done, we're looking into several issues, from how a Jacksonville culinary school is getting students ready in one of the most challenging times for the restaurant industry. Then we'll discuss pet scams and how to protect yourself and what to do if you should become a victim. Then we'll also check in with an ophthalmologist to see how he's coping with changing times. But first, we begin with an issue that is common to so many communities, including ours, the issue of homelessness. There are already a number of nonprofits tackling this issue, but we focus on a Jacksonville attorney who is doing it all by himself and how he's getting it done. During 2020, the corner of Jefferson and Union Streets turned into a homeless camp. For city leaders and some in the community, it became an eyesore and a reason for concern. For Jacksonville attorney Al Barlow, the plight of the homeless became a move of heart. He remembers it. It was on Christmas Eve.
It was raining and it was cold, and I passed a homeless camp right there on the corner of Jefferson and Union, which I had been seeing before, but it just didn't really hit me until that night.
The images of human suffering stuck with him and became difficult for him to move forward.
I just couldn't get them off my mind. I mean, it was just, I just broke down and I just cried. I mean, I had never cried like that in my life. And so my wife was like, well, what's wrong? So I was telling her and my daughter, about these people. But to be honest with you, I was kind of angry with God for letting them be in that position.
It would change his perspective on an issue that affects all communities, homelessness, and it would motivate him to address the problem.
I mean, what motivated me was, but by the grace of God, I'm homeless. And I think that's the right perspective to have. These are good people. They fall, bad times have befallen them, and just, I mean, they're great people. I pray over them. They're my friends now. And so these are not the people that a lot of people think. These are not murderers, rapists, robbers, arsonists, kidnappers. These are not necessarily drug dealers.
The Salzbacher Center, a nonprofit that provides services to the homeless, tells us the biggest contributing factor to the issue is the crisis in affordable housing. Barlow, a pastor as well, has now made it his mission to serve the homeless and educate the public.
What I'm trying to do is bring a level of consciousness to the people. So I show these people's plight, and it's very, very difficult to ignore it once you see it in living color.
In January, he began doing what has now become his passion, helping the homeless, not waiting for someone else to do it.
I run into 3 different types of people out here, Ken. The first one, they really feel sorry for the people, honestly, but they won't lift a finger to help them. They honestly feel bad, but they won't help them. The second person feels bad enough to do something about it. They will actually help. They will give them the shirt off their back. Then unfortunately, you got a third person. Not only are they not gonna help, they don't want you to help. Because the more you help, the more it condemns their heart to not do what God wants all of us to do. So I'm learning a lot out here dealing with these people.
Why do you think it has gotten apparently worse than it was 20, 30, 40 years ago?
Because we, the people, are not holding our elected officials accountable. There's enough blame to go around with each successive administration.
After working in the community for months, Barlow now believes the city needs to do more. He says it takes a commitment.
But I have the president of the Jacksonville Jaguars agree with me in a public meeting that they have a responsibility to take care of these people, and if the city of Jacksonville passes an ordinance to reserve 2% of the money that they give out, he supports it as long as they're not exclusively getting it from the Jaguars. Yet the city, and I've sent it to every city councilman and the mayor, yet they won't do the ordinance.
He has become a voice for this voiceless community.
They don't have a voice. That's one of the reasons I'm using everything that God has given me. I'm using my law office, I'm using my ministerial pursuits, I'm using my connections and everything else, Facebook, Twitter, whatever I have, to be a voice for these voiceless people.
And while he fights the politics on one end, every Friday he takes $500 in gift cards to the homeless community, a small contribution to making a change.
So I've been doing it 10 months, and every Friday I bring about $500 worth of grocery gift cards. Used to be $20 increments, now they're $10 increments because I can give out more cards.
Barlow says it's become a spiritual movement, and it's been emotional. And every day he is looking for ways to get it done.
I fight back tears now because, to be honest with you, and I think I told you this, if I didn't tell it to you, I've told it to many other people. I am 60 years old. By the grace of God, I've accomplished many things through God's grace and mercy. But I'll be honest with you, I believe my whole life set me up to do what I'm getting ready to do. What I'm doing now, what I've been doing, and what I'm going to continue to do for these people until I die.
Attorney Barlow says this is his calling. He's encouraged by the fact that other communities in Florida, like Miami, are now seeing a decline in their homeless population. He believes that we can have the same results right here in Jacksonville.
I think that's a good way to end the show. Thank you, Pastor Barlow, again for your passion, your commitment. And is there a final thought that you'd like to say before we close off? Oh, Pastor, are you muted?
Oh, yeah. Tyrone had to unmute me. He's controlling everything. Call Tyrone. But no, I thank you all for inviting us on this program. It's a divine move of God to help these people. And I think that the invitation came at the right time. So I thank you all for having invited Dawn and I to come on today. So thank you very much.
Thank you. And to our viewers, good night.
Good night.
Good night.